That's a good question. It really happened when I was like about 6 months into writing or doing the research for my book Sea of Poppies. So then I would say it was sometime in 2005. So a long time ago, really. It's about 18 years that I've been working on this. And it came as a complete surprise to me, But I really wanted to know more and more about it because, after all, I studied history in college. I have a degree in history. My BA was in history. And I've been reading history all my life because it interests me. And yet, this enormous chapter of our history was completely unknown to me. I really felt that, I've said what I had to say about, the characters who were involved with the opium trade in the 19th century. But I felt that it's important also to show that these things really happened, that this was actually going on, because it almost seems incredible today that the British Empire was the world's biggest drug cartel, and yet it was, It seems almost incredible that, so many prominent American families and organizations were so involved in selling drugs, So I felt it was necessary to establish this, with all the apparatus of footnotes, of references, so that people would know that I'm not making this up, this is known. I would say it's a veil of incomprehension rather than incomprehensibility, because we could comprehend, I think, what's going on. But yes, I think it's certainly the case. And every single commentator who writes about India-China relations always refers to this, the enormous ignorance that both sides have about each other. How little, we know about China, how little the Chinese know about us. And it's a very strange thing if you consider we are both Asian countries. In many ways, we both share the same sorts of religious traditions, almost, you could say. Them being mainly Buddhist and Taoist and so on. But there are such powerful similarities. And the first time I went to China was to Guangzhou. And what struck me so powerfully about being in Guangzhou, this was actually the resemblances. On the streets of Guangzhou, as in Calcutta, when you have a big banyan tree, there's always a little shrine, around this tree. And it's a sort of shrine of the Sthala Devata, what we would call. Similarly, when you go into a shop, there's always the little shrine to the, to the god of, often to the kitchen god or whatever. And just like when you go into a shop in India, there's usually a little shrine and there are, there's dhoop and so on burning, and it's exactly the same in China. So it's really strange in a way that despite all these shared traditions and so on, there's a kind of incommensurability, I would say, rather than incomprehensibility. Startling thing that happened, because like most Indians, we don't grow up with an awareness of the presence of Chinese influences in our lives, and certainly I, like everyone, was just as unaware of this as anybody else. But then it happened in 2005, actually, the first time I came back to Kolkata from visiting Guangzhou. And suddenly I realized that everything around me, it began with the cup of tea. I suddenly realized, this is cha. As we say in Bangla, this is cha. And cha, even the word comes from Cantonese. And then every single thing in the room, the cha, the chini after all just means Chinese. And so many other things, suddenly I became aware that I was just completely surrounded by these influences. It was kind of uncanny, really. Uh, I don't think it can be reduced to anything simple as you know, as a thought that can be sort of summed up, because obviously these connections are incredibly complex, incredibly complicated, and we just don't yet have a vocabulary for describing these connections. So I can gesture at them, I can hint at them, and I can bring to the forefront some of these connections, but I can't tell you that this is exactly the nature of the connection. Well, this idea of progress didn't always exist. It was actually invented in I think it was 1752 by a French economist, and thereafter it very rapidly caught on, this idea. It became incorporated into French revolutionary ideas, became most of all incorporated into ideas of the Enlightenment, and into the whole ideology of modernism, so that everything was, excused in the name of progress. Yes, well, we have to kill, so many Native Americans, but can't be helped. It's because for progress, Okay, we have to destroy the forests in order to set up mines. Why? Well, because of progress, And that rhetoric is still reproduced today. We hear it all the time. But for whom is this progress? For the people who lived in the forest, for whom the forest was the home, who sustained the forest. How is it progress for them? This is progress which goes to, a few mining interests. So it's a very, very deceptive idea, because it's an idea that's deployed to conceal all kinds of violence, all kinds of misdeeds. And it's one of the most dangerous and terrible ideas that humans have ever invented, I think. I would say that in fact the Malwa trade was not. It was dependent on smuggling networks of various kinds, but these smuggling networks were also connected with legitimate businesses. I think it's actually in the Bihar and UP regions that the opium trade, conducted under government monopoly, really led to a breakdown of social trust. It led to a breakdown of social order and created rampant criminality, And I think we are still seeing the long-term effects of that. I mean, if there's anything that's really striking about this whole Purvanchal region today, it is. I mean, there's much greater criminality there than in Western India, where in fact, society is, in general, I would say, more orderly. It has a huge, if unacknowledged presence, across the world. I mean, opium and opioids are still one of the most valuable commodities in circulation. I mean, drugs continue to be. I think it's drugs were, until quite recently, the most important illegal substance in circulation. But those criminal networks have since replaced drugs with migrants often, So I think actually handling migrants has become the most important clandestine or criminal activity. But next to that certainly is drugs, and it has a huge presence across the world, and equally in India. I mean, the opioid epidemic that you see in Punjab, where does it come from? It's being smuggled across the border. First from Afghanistan to Pakistan, then from Pakistan into Punjab. And that's what makes it so hard to control, because these criminal networks are incredibly powerful, and they're growing more powerful by the day. I think they should read Smoke and Ashes most of all to understand, this often concealed chapter of world history, to understand that, the histories that we've been told about, the so-called history of progress through the 19th century, is a completely deceptive idea. And that's why we are today facing literally absolute catastrophe. The breakdown of our environments, the breakdown of our societies, the breakdown of of what we consider a civilization is literally on our doorstep. And people should really wake up to this, because we can see the problems that are unfolding all around us today. These problems are not going away. This is just the beginning. Hi, I'm Amitav Ghosh, and my new book, Smoke and Ashes, is out now. You can order it on Amazon, and you can buy it in a bookshop. It's available everywhere.